Today I thought I'd address my thoughts on why I think traditionalism and feminism are pretty much the same thing. I know I get a lot of flack for this. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are quite a few people who hate me for saying this. And if I cared if people hated me, then I wouldn't be saying it. But unfortunately for those people who hate me for saying it, it's not that I don't care, it's just that, I mean, because there's a part of me that cares, you know, nobody really likes to be hated, but then there's the other part that says, well, how does this affect my life? People hate me on the internet, or they dislike me, or they don't want to be my fan anymore. How does this affect me in real life? It doesn't. I thought I would explain a little bit further on why I think feminism and traditionalism are essentially the same thing. Just to begin, I'd like to point out that feminism is essentially a male power fantasy. When you look at how much feminism strips agency from women and gives it to men, men essentially control everything in society. There's no way of getting out of this conclusion, because if you have a situation where you say, well, maybe women control 25% of society, the reality is that feminist theory always comes back to men controlling that 25% of women to do essentially what men want them to do. We would have an egalitarian culture tomorrow if men decided that that's what they wanted. So essentially feminist theory just completely strips all agency from women and pretty much says that men are responsible for everything. At the same time as it says that men are responsible for everything, it also gives them something to sacrifice to benefit women in society. They can sacrifice their great patriarchal powers to benefit women and society. Now, in Son of Threat narrative, Shedding the Slave Skin, and also alluded to in the Ottoman Empire, in my videos on the Ottoman Empire, I explained how when you have a group of people who encapsulates the belonging of a society, they're the ones who determine who belongs and who doesn't belong. And then you have another group of people who are pretty much perpetual outsiders. That group of people who are perpetual outsiders, well, first of all, in order to feel like they're perpetual outsiders, they have to be subjugated to some form of psychological scarring that results in shame. And then when you do that, when you perpetuate that psychological scarring on that group of people, they end up wanting, they have a profound sense of powerlessness, so they end up craving dominance or affectations of dominance or power fantasies. And they also want to serve and sacrifice for the group of people who contains the belonging of society, that governs the belonging of society. So what you end up with is the perfect slave. You have a person who wants to dominate you while serving you and sacrificing for you. If you look at the film Django Unchained and you look at the character of Stefan, he is the house slave who has complete and utter contempt for all black people besides himself. Now, what's interesting about the character and the dynamic between Stefan and his master, Candy, Calvin Candy, is that Stefan is actually smarter than Calvin. He is actually the brains of the operation, and yet he uses his dominance only to serve an undying loyalty to his master. And the reason why is because Calvin has claimed his sense of belonging, has claimed Stefan's sense of belonging. Stefan doesn't want to belong to black people. He hates black people. He thinks that he is different than every other black person, and that every other black person is a horrible, horrible, horrible creature. Except for him. He's different. He wants to belong to white society. He wants to be white, but since he can't be white, he'll do the next best thing. He'll serve them. And he serves his master with undying loyalty, even though he's smarter than his master is. He's actually the smart one. He is, and in fact, that's exactly the situation of the perfect slave. Smarter, stronger, faster, fiercer. And yet, all they want to do is serve the person who they get their sense of belonging from. They can be in every way superior. And in fact, it's better if they're in every way superior and dominant, because that makes a better slave. They're more useful. But still, all they want to do is sacrifice for their master, because their master controls their sense of belonging. And you can see that in a slave population, because a slave population always hates other slaves. And a truly, truly slave-minded slave always hates other slaves, always despises them. And even if he can't be, even if he gets the dim sense that this isn't appropriate, he will usually sidestep the issue by saying, no, I don't hate other slaves, I just hate the way they were raised, or I hate what they do when they associate with one another, or I hate their culture, but it all amounts to the same thing. I hate other slaves. And the reason why the slave hates other slaves is, again, because they are a physical manifestation of his lack of belonging to the group of people that he really wants to belong to, the master class. Watch Stefan and Calvin's interaction in Django Unchained, and you'll see a perfect example of this dynamic. Even though Stefan is smarter, he only uses his dominance over Calvin to serve Calvin, because he wants to belong to Calvin. And in that case, when a group of people owns the belonging of another group of people, it doesn't matter how powerful the group of people with a subjugated sense of belonging is, they will only ever use that power in service of the group of people they want to belong to. They could have the power of a god, and it wouldn't matter, because they would be in service to the people that they want to belong to. So that's a perfect example of this dynamic, and this is what feminism gives young men. It gives them the sense that they are all powerful, and that they have something to sacrifice for the group of people that they want to belong to. Now, the reason why I say that feminism and traditionalism are essentially the same thing is because traditionalism is raising young men in the traditionalist lifestyle. The feminist lifestyle doesn't change this because it's a variation, but raising young men in the traditionalist lifestyle, the lifestyle of the past, where women are predominant in child rearing, and we also hear things about women being the moral center of society, and women actually have a spiritual role that is incorporated into their body as the mother of God, whatever, right? All of that stuff, that Western traditionalism. Raising boys in that system creates boys who are addicted to a sense of dominance. But also believe they do not belong. So what happens is they want to serve the people that they see control belonging in society. They want to feel like they have a power to sacrifice. They want to feel like they have an ability to give those who control the belonging, women, something. Sacrifice something for women. And feminism gives that to young men. It gives them the opportunity to sacrifice for women and society. And it gives them a power fantasy. It feeds that desire to feel all powerful, almighty, and in turn sacrifice something for women. That's what it does. And the traditionalist way of raising young men to be expendable, to see themselves in service of something larger than themselves, creates young men who are hungry for something like feminism. Now, feminism really is sort of a secular form of traditionalism. With original traditionalism, you had this belief in a sky daddy who gave men their power fantasy of authority. But without that, where do men get their power fantasy from? Feminism. They get it from feminism. It's a secular attempt to replicate the power fantasy of the sky daddy, granting authority to men. It's a secular attempt to replicate that feeling of being all powerful. And you can see it in its sort of quasi pseudo-scientific-y attempt at legitimizing itself. It's just attempting to make sense, to make that urge, that power fantasy urge makes sense in a secular era when even most Christians don't believe in a sky daddy, at least not unironically. So that's essentially what feminism is. It exploits. It is a manifestation of young men who have this original original scar of shame, who then turn around and want to feel dominant because they want to assuage those original feelings of being helpless. But at the same time, they don't feel like they belong, so they want to dominate through serving. They want to dominate by sacrificing something for the group of people they do feel is centered in belonging in our society. So as long as you create boys like that, you are going to have something like that. It can be called all kinds of stupid things, but feminism is its current incarnation. It's just way better at it because nobody believes in the sky daddy anymore. Sorry, and nobody's ever going to start believing in the sky daddy unless it's sort of an ironic thing. So the reality is that traditionalism cannot actually address the problems that feminism is giving society. And it can't address the problems that feminism is giving society because in order to address it, it has to recognize the fact that women control belonging. It actually has to identify the social power that women have in order to curb it. Now, in the traditionalist system, the reason why the traditionalist system worked was, one, we all believed in the sky daddy, so the authority thing, it actually gave young men an outlet for their power fantasy. We don't anymore, so it doesn't. And also, in a traditionalist system was a system of scarcity. So women were kept in check. Not the power of belonging that women encapsulated was kept in check not by moral prohibitions, like we seem to think, but by simple necessity. Women, if women didn't do what they needed to do, people would die. And it was the wolves and famine that kept women in check. You know, the hard, cold reality of Mother Nature that kept women in check. If you get rid of that, they don't have anything to keep them in check anymore. There's nothing else. There never was. I mean, you cannot keep the people who control the belonging of a society in check, because their moral pronouncements will always be greater than the ones who don't contain the belonging of the society. They don't govern it. So, and in order to actually address the problems that feminism is creating, you'd have to address the hunger that young men have for a power fantasy, their desire to sacrifice for the better of their sense of expendability, and their desire to earn an identity through sacrifice to the people who control belonging or to society in general. And to do that, you would have to actually recognize and address the issue of belonging in our society. But if you recognize and address the issue of belonging, you would essentially be deconstructing the social structure that traditionalism is based on. So traditionalists never can really fight feminism. There are always going to be two sides of the same coin in slight opposition, but only because they're competing over the same social pressures and phenomena.